All right. So yes, thank you for all joining and those joining the recording as well. Let me turn off subtitles. There we go. All right. So yes, Angie Wolfe. I am based in the US, based in Denver, Colorado is where I'm at. It's a little bit about me in addition to what Bhaskar talked about. 19 years in marketing and proposal management, I guess all focused, besides my consulting in the civil construction and engineering industry. Started as an intern at Kiewit's corporate magazine, and then that happened to be the same department that also did proposals. So probably like many of you, I fell into this industry. But I've worked at Kiewit, HDR, MWH, Kramer North America. Now I'm consulting and doing, working with other clients in addition to their partners with a variety of delivery methods, best value, CMGC, design build, P3. As Bhaskar talked about, I am APMP certified, foundation and practitioner, and now the owner of Ideas at Dawn. So while you're here, proposal apocalypse, how and why to hire a consultant. And similar to what Bhaskar talked about with this hiring shortage, and yet the entities are still not, right? They're like, okay, we're not going to stop pursuing work or procuring work because you don't have enough people. So they're going to still doing that. So it's keeping up with what that looks like. So I'll tell you a little bit about my story when it comes to consulting. I was just thinking about this earlier this morning because I'm in Denver, so we're a few hours behind you guys, or some of you. But it started roughly probably 11 years ago. I was at Kiewit. I was working on one of their P3 projects. Where was I? Based in Denver, but working on a project in Ohio. And we needed a graphic designer. That was always a skill set that we always were short on. And so I hired a consultant, worked through a marketing agency. So this was and he was helping just with graphics, helping with overflow. We were actually running 2 pursuits at the same time. I was leading one for the P3 entity. And then we had another one that was design builds back to back, same area. So we were sharing this person, this graphic designer. And this person was an absolute rock star. I actually consult with him now. And we actually continued with him, not as a consultant, through another a legal litigation project that we were working on, and then eventually brought him on. So that in that case, my history there is we went to an agency, told them what we wanted, went through the interview process, and I picked a person. I got really lucky, in all honesty, that this person was an absolute rock star. But I didn't know what I wanted and what type of person to hire. So that was 10 years ago, roughly. How many years later? Probably about 5 years later, I was a proposal manager at Kramer, and they did not have graphic designers. So it was it's a smaller firm, regional here in the US, and I was the sole proposal manager. And graphics is not my skill set. I know that. I won't even fake it. So I went through another agency, marketing agency here in Denver, and hired a graphic designer. So same process, in that I would do the interviewing, decide who I wanted, and kind of work on a trial basis to work with this person. I also at the same time hired another proposal consultant. She was someone I had worked with at Kiewit and hired her. So although I've worked with consultants, it was never honestly even a concept in my brain to be a consultant. And then start 3 years ago, actually here in April, I had been traveling based in Albuquerque, still living in Denver, which is where my family's at, my husband and two boys, and traveling back and forth for about a year and a half. I'd go there Monday through Friday, home on the weekends, not something, a recipe for burnout, let's be honest. So that's when I found a ad for freelancing on Facebook. Took a course. I'm like, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm like, I'm done with proposals. Who wants to do this anymore? Not me. We're all burnt out. So I actually went down the writing path initially when I started my business, and then realized, well, this is like going to take a lot of work to create a business, create an essentially new entity or new branding, new personal identity. So I decided that I was just going to branch out and do proposal consulting. So it was a side gig. Is how I started on the side. And about a year later, I had enough traveling and decided, okay, I'm going to take the chance. We had saved enough money. And so that's how I started. I started it full-time 2 years ago in June. So not very long from a work perspective, but still doing the same things that I did in corporate. So that's my journey from using consultants to realizing, oh, I guess I can do that. So that's what this is all about today, is telling you a little bit about this story, both as coming from corporate and using a consultant to now being a consultant that my clients will bring on. So when do we bring on consultants? Ideally, during a pre-work phase, during the go, no go, when you are still going through that process so they can affect it. It allows them to meet the team members. You can outline expectations on their involvement. They can participate in planning meetings, especially if you find someone, which I'll talk about in a little bit on where to find them, but find someone who has experience with your client. They can bring lots of knowledge that you might not have because they could have worked with that client before with other firms. So usually this is about 2 months before the targeted release of the proposal or SOQ. And it's also, they can help influence, which people you pick, which projects you pick, creating your win themes, identifying your differentiators, looking at teaming partners. Do we need to bring some on or not? And so, and this is in my world as a proposal consultant, this is like a proposal manager. That's the role I play. In addition to a little bit of everything else, but it's not, if you're bringing on a writer, an editor, or another position, graphic designer, less influence here. But so this is ideally for a proposal manager or a very key person. The other role that I bring on with my clients is we help with the strategy piece, which is why you want to do this months ahead of time before a proposal is released. So we'll walk through the themes and differentiators and help develop these as part of that process. Okay, that's the ideal situation. Still good if you're looking at bringing on a consultant, slightly ahead of the proposal release, less than that 2-month window. Sometimes it can be concurrent with identifying the internal team. So for larger firms, if you're still figuring out who is going to be leading it internally, so with Kiewit, for example, sometimes I will play proposal manager as a consultant, and sometimes I will play like a writer, editor, and support their proposal manager. But it's done early enough in advance so we can still go through the ideal process and still do that pre-work. And why we still want to do it, ahead of the proposal release, so we can still allow that time to influence win strategies, develop projects, develop resumes, get a lot of that pre-work done ahead of time. That is really the goal. Whether you're bringing on consultants or not, we want to get ahead of that pursuit. Other situations, so that's, I would call it proposal focused. Other situations in bringing on a consultant that have actually helped with a couple clients lately is looking at new markets. They were going, one of my clients wants to go after after a proposal with a client that they don't have the best experience, in my opinion. And so I was helping them through identify, go through the requirements on, project experience minimum requirements. Do they have the teaming partner? And this is all based off of a draft RFP, knowing that it still could change. But if someone is looking at a new market, a new client, what does that look like? And so there's some opportunity there to bring on a consultant who has experience with that market or with that client to help guide you through that process if it's new. And look at that possibility and probability of winning. In the end, with my example, with the client that I've been coaching, I told them I recommend they don't go after the pursuit. It's a May talk here in the US, and I've done it twice previously, and they just don't have the experience to compete with the bigger firms. And so in the end, I took myself out of work because I'm like, don't go after this. But you can bring in consultants who can give you that fresh perspective about new markets, new projects, other things like that. So where do you find consultants? I always say the best place to go are your existing connections. Don't Google it. If you do Google it, I'll talk about what here in a minute, what you might find. So your existing connections, LinkedIn, your associations, that's where you should go. You would be surprised if you post on LinkedIn or send messages to some people on who may or may not have used consultants before. So if you want someone specific with industry experience, you want to start there. So you can find those people that have done it before. So asking within your industry, that is key. Also teaming partners. Most of my experience has been on the construction side of the business and working for contractors. But we work a lot with our engineers and design partners and other consultants. And they tend to use consultants more than the contractors. So ask them. Do not be afraid to put it out there, because you'll probably be surprised on how many have probably used consultants before. So start within your industry, ask on LinkedIn, ask other groups or boards that you're in, and then ask your teaming partners. Look at your local chapters. So whether that's SMPS here in the US, APMP, which is worldwide, posting jobs on LinkedIn is another way to do that. And whether that's shown as a temporary remote non or contract position, there are other ways actually to find consultants as well. Yep, post to LinkedIn, do a standard post. You can use message boards, groups. There, at least here in the US for APMP, we actually have a consultants LinkedIn group. And so there's a handful, probably about 30 of us consultants here in the, I think most of us are in the US. I think Beskar is actually in it. So some of us worldwide, but using those places to find. So just ask. And don't be afraid of not asking questions and feeling stupid, because in the end, you're not stupid. So this is where I would start. Start with your connections. You will have the best success here. But making sure you find the right fit. So your best bet is that power of networking. Freelance boards. These would be what I consider like Fiverr, Upwork. Those are the two that are the most common, where if someone asks you on trying to find a consultant from a proposal perspective, they might send you there. And I'm on those boards, and I've applied to positions there. And both as a person who's coaching you on where to find them, the biggest thing here is that you would get or could get people without the industry experience. There's been multiple positions posted, whether it's a very low price or a very high price, that clients are expecting a really quick turnaround, which if you can't do it, right? If you can't do it within your own firm for a quick turnaround, how do you expect someone else to be the miracle worker? And do it in a quick turnaround. So knowing what that looks like. So that's why we want to get away from these fire drills, both internally, because we don't want to do it that way either, but also when bringing on a consultant. So you'll see it there. You can go search Upwork and search proposal, and you'll see, or SOQ, and you'll see other people posting about what they're looking for, but making sure you find someone with all the experience that you need. So asking all the questions, and just treat them like you were hiring a full-time person is really how I would approach it. There's situations that my clients have talked about in which they've had hired other consultants and the expectations are not the same. So making sure you are communicating what you want them to do. Because although someone may have done proposal management for, IT, it's not the same as construction or engineering. And yes, it can translate, but it depends on the person. And there will be hiccups if they don't understand that. So be cautious if you do use Fiverr or Upwork, and know what you're potentially getting for the price. If it's too good to be true from a cost perspective, it probably is. The other option that I've used when I talked about in my story is these temp agencies. So Denver, we have a couple here that are really marketing specific, and it's usually where we can find mostly graphic designers, although there's other proposal management staff that can also go there. So people who are consulting, no longer at corporate, but don't want to be the business, don't want to have to go market, do the BD, all of that piece of it. So that's where these temp agencies come into play. They tend to be quite expensive because they'll take somebody's hourly rate and mark it up. So, right, they're making the money. So just like hiring someone from one of the boards or through your network, or hiring someone full-time, you have to understand what you need. And that's what I would treat it. So you're going through that same process of looking for somebody, that hiring process, interviewing them. They say they do vet them, but that's a little bit, right? It's still kind of like the interview phase. Someone can say that they've done this before, but until you put them in that situation and they can really prove it, that's the key. A pro about this going with a temp agency is that you don't have to worry about the contract. You sign a contract with the temp agency and that's it, right? You will do a weekly a timesheet that you have to approve for each person. But otherwise, it's pretty quick. And besides trying to find the right person, the contract and all of that is with this agency and not each firm. And then if you don't, if that person doesn't work out, it's kind of besides the process to get them onboarded, another person onboarded, it can be quick to find a new person because of their network. So that would be an advantage of the temp agencies, but you tend to do pay more versus contracting with someone individually, or even through Upwork or Fiverr, where the costs tend to be a lot lower. So those are where in my history where I have found other consultants. So contract options. And feel free to ask any questions in the chat as well. Otherwise, we will get them at the end. So there can be lots of contract options. When it comes to, we'll say, use that marketing example. You're paying that person at an hourly rate, but you do have a commitment to that temp agency, depending on your terms there. So it could be just for that pursuit. It could be if you sign a like a longer term contract, which would be kind of like a retainer. But in most cases, if it doesn't work out, you're one and done sort of thing with temp agencies. So for Upwork, for example, with that situation, you would be paying them someone, it's two options there. You can be a lump sum price and it can be an hourly rate. In most cases with Upwork, it can be either. And with them, you pay a person as they go. So very similar to bringing on a consultant, in that whether they're billing you monthly or weekly or however that looks like, or at the end. Those are kind of the two options for that are most common. Obviously, right, just like with our clients, the risk shifts. So if you're having your consultant bid or provide a price that's a lump sum price, they're taking on more of the risk, especially if they haven't worked with you before and haven't done this RFP before. So from what I do, I will bid it at not a higher rate, but account for potentially more hours than what would be actual, which would be your hourly rates, because I'm taking that risk. So similar to our clients, lump sum is for me riskier. Hourly rates, or T&M, time and materials, is less risk, except it's more unknown to the clients or to whoever's hiring the consultant. So this is where you can negotiate that hourly rate, negotiate win fees, which would be another option to add into there. But you can set a cap. So some of my clients set a cap on the pursuit, but it's still an hourly rate. So it's kind of like, it's a blend. But otherwise, some don't have caps. And so the hourly rates can be whatever it takes. So there are some risk there as well. Monthly retainer, depending on, so from a freelancing perspective or consultant, clients who would hire contractors could create and I've done this with two clients, where it was a monthly retainer. In this case was both cases actually, was a certain number of hours per month. So it essentially was an hourly rate, but they had the guarantee of my services for a certain number of hours per month. And we set it for it can be a 6-month contract. It can be a truly month-to-month contract. It can be a 12-month contract, whatever works for your firm. But it's a way to essentially pre-purchase those hourly rate hours, in most cases at a discounted rate, is what a monthly retainer involves. And then other options. I've done win fees with other clients. What else have I done? Weekly rates, daily rates. So whatever works for you in that pursuit, or long-term for that department, if you want to bring on someone more of a ad hoc long-term role, figure out what works for you, because the consultant more than likely is flexible from that perspective. A couple questions. So yes, Michael, for a T&M contract or time and materials hourly rate, I don't report weekly on hours. What do I do? It's usually just a monthly thing at the end of the month, but it does depend on the pursuit and how involved someone is from the client side. In most cases, I'm working with them pretty closely, and they know not the cost, but at least the level of effort on how long it's going to take to do a proposal. And so, yeah, we haven't had issues with that. There may have been some sticker shock for some in the early days, but that was how big of that was like a 200-page proposal. So yeah, depending on what that looks like for hourly rates. Okay. So those are the contract options. So these are more of the payment structure, and but obviously make sure you have the actual contract in place. Make sure you have your NDA in place from a contract perspective, and whether as a firm or as a consultant, whatever that looks like. But both entities should be protecting themselves from that perspective and understand the rights, especially from a graphics perspective. I've had a few graphic designers who aren't used to working in corporate, thinking that they own the rights to the graphics they develop. So making sure that you are getting what you want, even from a contractual perspective as well, in addition to the payment structures. So some best practices on how to incorporate the consultant into your process. It has to start off with trust, and you'll see this again later. But in order to build that trust, start with a smaller pursuit, put them in a different role, whether that's a writer role, a coordinator, editor, supporting the proposal manager, so like an assistant. But that will, especially if you're bringing them in for strategic pursuits, which is where I come in to help my clients. It is not just usually everyday pursuits. These are strategic projects they want to win. And so bringing them in, if you haven't worked with them before, on something smaller, so you understand their processes, they understand you, and you can start to build that trust. Because just like an employee, that is key for everything. So that could involve making sure they participate in those win strategy meetings, the go, no go, to get to know the team and the company. One of my superpowers, I like to say, is going into a situation in a new client, in a new proposal, and getting to know everybody immediately and being able to jive with them and connect them and know the company and know the team. And just being confident enough that I can act like I'm an employee. And that's what I tell my clients, is that treat me as if I'm your employee, because I don't want to be treated any different. And that's also how I, especially with the clients I represent, like I want to be synonymous with them and be very seamless with the internal processes. Obviously, show respect. They are hired to help, but be mindful of how you're treating them. Sometimes company cultures can be a little different, and some consultants won't work late. They won't, everyone's a little bit different. So make sure those expectations are communicated, and that not that you treat them better than your employees, but they could quit. And although there is a contract in place, they are less likely, one, to come back, or they could quit on you in the middle of a pursuit or ghost you, which employees obviously don't do. So be careful what you're doing there. Make sure you don't forget to invite them to all of your internal meetings, whether that's your estimate meetings, pricing meetings, any manager meetings, because they're not there, whether it's in the office or on Teams virtually or whatever that looks like. Sometimes it can be easy to forget to include them. So write yourself a note to always include them at the meetings. Yes, that will cost you, depending on what your pricing model is and pricing terms are, but they will get things out of that as a consultant, and ask questions and help you through that process. That value will outweigh what you're going to pay them on an hourly rate. But don't forget, set those clear expectations, the boundaries, the meetings, the reviews, what you want them to attend. If they are just helping, what you want them to lead, at work hours, all of those things. Like, don't, because you've hired one consultant and you've hired another one, they're not the same. And you just remember that you really, whether it's an onboarding thing that you need to do, but making sure that you do set expectations. Some people will ask and some people won't as a consultant. So making sure what that looks like. Also, let them know if you want them to use certain tools of yours from a corporate perspective. So whether that's a proposal plan, responsibility matrix, your proposal schedule, the IFBP or PSOE process, which is the win strategy, any templates you want them to use, what review software do you want them to use? Like, and what I say is, and some of my clients will say, we don't care, and be like, well, I want to know what processes they're using so we can be more efficient and more streamlined. The other thing not here, style guides. Everyone edits a little differently. So corporate style guides, if you have one. The templates, is it a corporate template that you reuse over, or are we creating new ones? If you're creating a new one, what are your favorite colors? You know, well, what does that look like? And everyone's a little different. And this consultant, right, it's just like an employee, except they're experienced. So they've done this before, but they still need a bit of onboarding. And that's what this is intended to do. So if you onboard your people internally with certain tools and programs, let them know what you want them to use. And if you don't have a preference, then they'll use what they want or what they have, but be aware that it could be different. And so sometimes it's just easier to have them use what you have. Unless you, another option, which I've done with clients, is they give me what they have and then I make it better. So if I need to add to it, add some more structure to it, I will do that as well. But don't forget to share those tools. And then communication, any standard operating procedures, any processes you want them to follow, whether it's the kickoff meeting, when does that occur? Any standard operating procedures when it comes to the actual proposal process and management, and also the tools that you want them to use, where to get the project data, where to get resumes, all of those things are unique to your firm. So make sure you communicate what you want them to use. And trust, feedback, trust, feedback, trust. If this is a first time you've worked with this person, trust and feedback are very important to having a successful relationship and using this person over, or finding the right person that does fit your company. Other things that are important, designating an internal point of contact. So in my case with my clients, this tends to be a proposal coordinator who can get me access to projects, get me project photos, get me resumes, boilerplate content, go-bys. If I don't have access to all the internal stuff, that's what this person does for me. Introduction meeting, setting up a meeting with the team to let them know, hey, we have a consultant. They're going to be doing this and vice versa. And doing this before the proposal starts off is going to be much more efficient versus throwing them headfirst into a proposal, which is why when we talk about when to bring them on, this is important. So you can get some of those hiccups out of the way. Server access, whether that's Teams, depending on where your projects is, or project information is, SharePoint, whether it really is a server, depending on how long you're going to have this consultant, but be aware that unless you have identified this internal point of contact, server access and getting the data and information is going to be critical to their success, which is critical to your success. So making sure you do something there from that perspective. And then having information that's readily available. So if you're already going after you know what proposal they're going to be on, having that internal, either marketing person, proposal person, admin, somebody have information and start gathering it for them. So whether that's the SOQ, your go-bys, your resumes, your projects, your photos, things like that, that they don't have to start asking for on day one, that you are ahead of the game and having that information available for them. Because in the end, consultants, understand your owner's needs, can ask all the questions for for it to be a success, setting clear expectations, but not every consultant can do everything. And understanding that although we may market ourselves as proposal consultants and proposal managers, not everyone's the same, just like not employees are the same as well. Years within the industry do matter, and then treat them like yours. I always tell my clients, treat me like I am one of your employees. I don't want to be treated any differently. And that's something I tell my clients. And I want it to be seamless, which is why I tell them that. I don't want to be viewed as an external person that they can't use, or that is too expensive, or whatever that looks like. And being that authentic partner to the whole process, which comes back to the trust and feedback. And let me go to the questions real fast. Michael again. So if there's any other questions, feel free to put them in the chat. Michael again, an advantage of hiring a consultant is they can provide honest inputs with less pressure to corporate politics, right? Have you found clients value that when you recommend a no bid? I've only had to do it once, Michael, and I haven't heard back from them. But from a true no bid, or giving an opinion of a unbiased opinion, yes, for sure. They do value that. One of my clients, we were doing interview prep, and they're like, okay, they asked me, okay, give us honest feedback. And is I think one of the big reasons why some clients will hire consultants. They want, if it's a very strategic pursuit, they want someone to give honest opinions without fear, right? Like you said, of speaking the truth, without, bending to corporate politics and they're your boss type of thing. So yes, that has been a success. And in being able to, they want it, at least for me, they want that honesty and which is why they tend to hire consultants too, is they want that honesty and feedback. Your other question, Michael, turn down, you've had to turn down some approaches from companies who've contacted you far too late in the proposal RFP cycle. Have you had to do the same? I have, especially depending on what that looks like. Whether it's, so some of my clients, for example, the process is whether it's a week or two, but it's like an edit. It's not proposal management. But on other ones, P3 projects, for example, they've asked for bids or other design build or CMGCs. And depending on one, so going back to the timeline of incorporating consultants into your process, consultants, just like employees, can be hard to find. And the sooner you can find one to help you with your project, you can make changes if they aren't the right fit. But consultants are busy as well. And so if you contact them too late in the process, they can't help you either. So you're really in a hard place as a company to, because you already needed a consultant for whatever reason. And if all your consultants are saying no, then you are in a very similar situation where you then are back to where you were. And it's in a no better situation. So, which is why trying to find someone months ahead of time, or usually at least 2 months ahead of time, just to build up also your bench, build up your bench of consultants. You can have more than one. You can have proposal consultants. You can build up your team of writers, editors, of graphics. One of my clients does that. They hire me to do one thing and I bring on a team, separate contracts, and they help with that. So there are some other options there, but the sooner the better in all the situations. And for those on the call today and viewing the recording, let me go back here. Something special that my firm is offering you, because if you are frustrated and aren't winning the proposals you expected, my 7-figure consulting firm, take advantage of our Eagle Eye for winning proposals with a unique proposal audit opportunity. So this is a way to engage with us at about, I think 70 or 80% of the price of consulting. So what you walk away with is a step-by-step action plan to improve your document. You also get a face-to-face, virtual to virtual, whatever you want to call it, consultation to ensure you're ready to win. So you can scan the QR code. I didn't say that, but scan the QR code. It'll take you to the website with more information. But I've used this same framework. So it's a six-step framework that I not only help clients win, but I also train on as well. So I use this framework to help Kiewit win over $2 billion of new work in 2 years, Ames Construction here in the US, win a $24 million must-win CMGC proposal, and then Kramer recently here at the beginning of the year win their largest project to date, which is a $500 million CMGC project for the Department of Transportation. So if you have that important proposal coming up, one that's a must win, I'll put the link in the chat here. The pricing is $24.97 for the first 10 people. It is a promotional pricing right now. It will not be offered at this price again because my business coach or coaches will not let me. But if you purchase it, then you actually have 6 months to cash in on that audit. So if you decide that you want to buy it now, but don't have the right proposal you want me to look at, or that right strategic pursuit for me to review, you can hold on to it. And so again, first 10 people for the special pricing. And are there any other questions? Let me put the chat is the link to that. Otherwise, Bhaskar, anybody else on the chat have any questions?
Yes, Angie, I received a couple of questions, Angie, and then let me start. And thank you for sharing, Angie. That was very, very useful. Angie, question number one, there are some people who are considering to become consultant. They are still in full-time employment, but they are planning to, what they want to do here is to do part-time consulting. In your experience of hiring consultants and also working as a consultant, what's your thoughts on become a part-time consultant, and what advantages, disadvantages, the pros and cons? What advice do you have for people? Yeah,
so that's how I started, was part-time. It can be exhausting, let's be honest, especially if you're doing proposals in both situations, that just know when enough's enough and know kind of what your limit is. I use consultants as well on my team. So it's just not me. I have a bench of like 13 on my team, that some of them do it full-time consulting and some do it part-time. And it really does kind of depend what you want. What lifestyle do you want to stay at in a full-time position, or are you looking to eventually leave? And what does that look like? So have a game plan before you start it. In the end, my goal was to leave corporate. So I knew at some point I would have to rip off the Band-Aid and leave, even though it's never the right time. But if you just want it for side income, there are lots of consultants and other teams that are looking to grow their benches, especially with experienced people. So just like there's people on the corporate side or in full-time jobs struggling to hire people, the consultants are as well. So finding those right people, but start small, understand if it's really something you want. I have some other people on my team that all they do is they run it through their social security number. They don't even create a business. So there's easy ways, and it's pretty easy to get started if it's something you're interested in. But know kind of what you want, know your boundaries, know what you like to do, know what you don't like to do. That's the beauty of it. When I interview people to join my team, I always ask them, what do you like to do and what do you don't want to do? Because you have a choice as a consultant on what you don't want to do. So know that ahead of time and know if you really do want to do it full time or not. A lot of us make a living out of it. it just depends what you want.
Thank you, Angie. That was useful. Again, I'll leave the attendees to drop your messages on your experiences of a hiring consultant or working as a consultant, and let the chat flow on that. The second question, Angie, is sometimes, when you are hiring a consultant for the very first time, your mind always goes into, okay, let me go and hire another full-time proposal manager, or do I go and hire a proposal consultant? In your opinion, did you had a dilemma when you're hiring? If so, what advice do you have for proposal managers who are in the dilemma of, should I have to go and invest on a proposal manager full-time, or do I have to go for a proposal consultant?
There's a couple options there. The biggest thing, so I have a couple clients in which I'm actually their essentially marketing team and proposal manager. I've done this actually for 3 firms now. And where I am their person. And from a company perspective, and having talked with my clients, they get a better value because they don't need someone full-time. And really understanding your needs. Are you doing a pursuit once a quarter that is 3 weeks long? Or are you needing someone and doing pursuits, from a marketing perspective, doing enough each month that it pays to bring someone on full-time? In the end, bringing someone on full-time, even when you add benefits and everything else that goes with that, will probably be cheaper than hiring a consultant. If you're hiring a consultant that's that, I won't say cheap, at that low of a cost, you're probably getting what you pay for. So really understand, and they could. So I've also had consultants, not me, but other consultants I've worked with or hired, who get hired by their firm that they're working for. So they will eventually hire them. So there are some options there as a company on what that looks like, but really understanding the workload. Because if your intent is to hire a consultant full-time, or have a consultant work full-time, you'll want to do more of a monthly retainer price or a different pricing model to get a better deal from a company perspective. Because if you're giving them guaranteed hours, they should give you a discounted rate. So really understanding what that looks like if you want a consultant and don't want to bring on someone full-time. But there are a few options there, Bhaskar.
Thank you, Angie. That was very useful. Angie, I think another question that came up on this one is, halfway through, like as you rightly said, sometimes consultants come and then they say they can do it, and you are in a hurry, so you don't have time. So you hired somebody whom you thought, they can do the job. 2-3 days later, they weren't able to deliver the job. They left or they ghosted. Is there any kind of, as you talked about due diligence and other things, as a proposal manager, sometimes you don't have time for these things. What advice would you give them on the first 2 days of the new person joining?
For me, it's really the onboarding. So just like a new employee, where is everything at? Also understand, and you can ask them, they might not tell you, but understand their workload. Do they have 5 other pursuits going on at the same time? And communicate those expectations. No, you can't expect them to be available full-time unless you're going to pay them that, but understand expectations and let them know, or communicate your expectations that, whether you want them on site. I've been on site for my clients. I've been virtual. I will travel for them. But what does that look like in setting up expectations before you even sign the contract? Don't bring them on board and thinking that they're going to be your saving grace and shining or your knight and come rescue you if it's really too good to be true. And that really does, you really want to think of it from that perspective. And the other thing is what else? So do that due diligence when you're kind of interviewing them. I will go through an interview phase essentially with my clients. Not all of them will bring me on, whether in my case, it's usually from a price perspective, but understand who they are and what their capabilities are and what they can provide before you bring them on. So ideally, when they come on board and they've ghosted you, there's a big problem. Like either they just were not truthful with you because they shouldn't have ghosted you. But that first 2 or 3 days, getting them set up with everything that we talked about, whether it's those templates, those go-bys, communicating your expectations, giving them someone internally to work with. That can be the pursuit leader to the estimator to a proposal person, but somebody that they can go inside your company and be like, okay, I need this, and being responsive to that. What else? Those are the big things. Hopefully you fix that, or those expectations are clear beforehand. The other thing is having a level of trust, right? You have to have that level of trust to start off with in the beginning. But if they are sick, it's like, let us know, like communicate with us. An example actually that came up, I was at my physical therapist a couple days ago, and they were interviewing somebody, and he texted her multiple times. She's like, yeah, I'll get back to you. Essentially ghosted them. And she texted them back yesterday saying, hey, I was at the hospital with my uncle. Sorry, I didn't get back to you. Well, she had multiple opportunities. It takes 5-10 seconds to send a text, to send an email, but understand and let them know that yes, things will happen. Just communicate, and just being open to that, and making sure they understand that if something happens in your personal life, just like an employee, we need to know so we can make additional plans. It's not going to look bad on them, but life happens. And making sure, like, in setting that expectation up front when you bring them on board. The other thing I didn't talk about is billing. Like, what are your expectations there? And Michael talked about it in one of his Q&A, but do you expect weekly reports? Do you expect an itemized timesheet at the end of the month when they bill, and what that looks like as well? Because you don't want to get to the end of the month and they're like, oh, sorry, I don't do that. Or, you know what I mean? So making sure a lot of those expectations are communicated up front. And if you don't know, ask, post it on LinkedIn. There are plenty of consultants out there that'll help you, or other people who have hired to help you through this process. So it is the onboarding for you, if you're new to this, or even your consultant, they can help you with that, and ask them. I'm sure you are not, ideally, you're not their first client either, because most of us have done this as a side gig and then figured it out if we're doing it full time. So they have lots of lessons learned as well, and ask them for their advice, depending on what that looks like for you.
Perfect. Thank you, Angie. I think
Yes.
that was very useful. So let's officially enter the Scribble Quest. The 3 questions from the webinar, because this is slightly more practical webinar. I'm just going to ask how attentive you are.
Yes.
So let's just go. So the very first question, just was a fun part. In the first few slides, Angie had a colorful photo where she said where to find consultants, and she had professional network. If we look carefully, there were 2 analog phones on the side. There were 2 colors, obviously. Can you tell me what color phones were there? Even if you pick up one color, that's fine.
I don't know what I even have on my old slides, Bhaskar.
Let's see. Obviously, there is only limited colors, and there were 2 phones on the side in the professional network thing. Just guess. It's fine.
Yeah, it's yellow, blue, or orange.
Anyone else want to try? Just go for it. Yeah.
Yeah, let's say Roshni had yellow, blue, orange.
Yeah, it's red and blue.
Red and blue.
Red and blue. So thank you for
I
trying.
forgot the red.
Give it to you. Others, again, this was a technical slide because this is where things get right or things get wrong, because sometimes, yeah, let me get to the question. There were 4 contract terms option that Angie gave. Can you name 3 out of 4? Because whether you're working as a consultant, whether you're planning to hire a consultant, I think this is where things break down. What do you think are the, out of the 4 options, can you name at least 3?
Good job, Michael.
Let's see. Yes, Michael. Let's wait for a few more. I think I'm waiting for the exact terminology, Michael.
Okay. Exact terminology, Michael. I know this answer.
Yes. But again, it's important to be honest. Sometimes what happens is, sometimes consultants have been requested to just say, hey, you know what, we don't know the exact dates, come for a fixed term proposal. Where we don't know the exact timeline of the proposal, whether it gets extended or not, then they get called. Yeah. Just be open, honest in this, but yeah, totally in hourly rate, retainer, if we know exactly what it is, and then you go for the other option. So, but that's good. Then continuing on that, the very basic version, if you are just looking for, short product-based proposals, there were a couple of freelance boards that Angie suggested to have a look with similar experience. Just be mindful of what was those 2 portals that Angie suggested to have a look at freelance boards.
Anybody remember?
Anyone? Sorry, I know we have crossed a little bit of this time, so just go for it. If you haven't used, yeah, it's Upwork and Fiverr, because yes, it's very good for short-term, one-off, hourly rate type of a thing. But professionally, I wouldn't, as Angie mentioned, I wouldn't recommend that, because it's important to get to know somebody whom you know, and always start with the connections and the recommendations, as Angie pointed out. That's good. The last point is, I think, let me make it. There were 2 motorbikes in the starting off sections. Did you notice the number in those motorbikes? What was the number?
That's a good question.
Starting off, okay, this is what you need to do. There were 2 motorbikes. If whoever gets this, guys, I'll give you a free APMP certification. You have full access to our portal. This is hard one.
I'm going to take a guess. I'm sure it's a 2-digit number. Well, maybe not.
Right. Okay. I know this is a hard one. I think the numbers were definitely, I would not, if I
so, yeah, Roshni, it was the numbers that were on the 2 motorbikes. What were the numbers on those? It was what was it? Start of which section?
It was starting off section.
Yeah. So there was numbers on those dirt bikes, motorbikes.
Don't worry. I think, there were 2 motorbikes, small and big, 269. No, that's a good guess. It was, but not far off though. It's 263 and 27, 263 and 27. So
wow.
Formally ends it. Thank you, Roshni. Thank you, Michael, for trying. And again, others, it could have been slightly edgy here, but experiment it. Hiring consultant is not a bad thing, especially in where I am from in UK. Culturally, people don't, whereas in US it's much more. Whereas in other geographies, it's just a stepping process. So I think it's important to ask for help. Whether you work or not, it's a different story. But we'll send you the slides and the presentation in the next 48 hours. As you know, the next, and if there is any question, please do utilize Angie's, follow up with Angie, drop your note and discuss any needs with her. Definitely that will be of great help. And primarily, that ends this week's Office Hours webinar. Next week, we will be moving next week webinar to Monday, the week after. It's 18th of April. Pleased to host Roshni. We will be talking about how to capture your audience with the best first impression. That's the next week's webinar. But because it's half term here, we are moving it into the 18th of April. Please to join in. It's Monday. Then we are back again every week from there on the Thursday. So that's it. So the slides, webinars will be available on demand, and the related resources will be emailed out in the next 48 hours. So thank you so much, Angie, for your time.
Yes, thank you.
I'll see you very soon. And thank you
Okay.
all. If I didn't speak to you next week, have a great Easter halftime break. Ramadan Mubarak to everybody else in the Middle East. And that's it. Thank you all. Thanks so much.
Thank you.